You start each day feeling mentally scattered, jumping from task to task without clear direction or focus. Your mind feels dull and reactive instead of sharp and strategic, while others navigate challenges with laser-like precision. I am Sun Tzu, the ancient strategist who understood that mental sharpness is the foundation of all victory. What I discovered about daily mental preparation will transform your mornings into a forge for strategic thinking, giving you the clarity to outmaneuver any challenge before it appears. But first, like this video, subscribe for more ancient wisdom, and comment below where you're watching from. I want to know which corner of the world is ready to develop an unbeatable strategic mind. In my war room each dawn, I would prepare not just my armies, but my mind. The ancient scrolls speak of weapons and formations, but they never mention the most crucial element, the sharpened consciousness that sees opportunity where others see only chaos. Today, I share with you the morning practices that built an empire of strategic thinking. I keep beside me always the scroll of daily victories, a simple parchment where I recorded not the grand conquests that historians celebrate, but the small strategic wins that made those conquests possible. Each morning entry reminded me that battles are won before the first sword is drawn. In the quiet moments when a prepared mind meets an unprepared challenge, let me share with you how I discovered this truth. I was a young strategist, confident in my knowledge of formations and tactics, when I faced my first real test of command. The enemy approached our position with superior numbers, and my advisors urged immediate action. But something felt wrong. My mind raced between options: tack, retreat, fortify like a startled horse with no clear direction. That night, as I lay sleepless before what seemed certain defeat, I realized my fatal error. I had prepared my soldiers, but neglected my most important weapon, my own consciousness. While I had spent weeks drilling troops in formation, I had never once drilled my mind in clarity. I was sharp with sword techniques, but dull where it mattered. Most in those dark hours, I began what would become my morning practice. I asked myself, what is the true state of my mental forces? Where are my thoughts scattered? What assumptions cloud my vision? What emotions weaken my judgment? Just as I would scout enemy territory, I began scouting the terrain of my own mind. By dawn, something had shifted. The same tactical situation that had seemed hopeless now revealed multiple opportunities. I saw gaps in the enemy's approach that my scattered mind had missed. More importantly, I understood that mental preparation wasn't just helpful, it was the decisive factor that separated victory from defeat. We won that battle not through superior force, but through superior mental clarity. While the enemy attacked with brute strength, we responded with precision born from a prepared mind. That day, I learned that chaos in the mind creates chaos on the battlefield, but order in consciousness creates order in all circumstances. From then forward, I understood that the enemy, whether ancient or modern, attacks the unprepared mind first. They count on your thoughts being scattered, your attention divided, your judgment clouded by emotion or assumption. The moment you allow mental chaos, you have already lost the strategic advantage. This is why I began each day by sharpening my mind like a blade, not with meditation or philosophy, but with strategic mental preparation. I would assess my mental resources, identify potential cognitive weaknesses, and position my thoughts for the challenges ahead. This practice became more valuable than any weapon in my arsenal. In my private quarters, I kept what I called the strategic mind map, not a physical chart, but a mental framework that I would construct each morning, positioning my thoughts like positioning armies before battle. Just as I would never send troops into unknown territory, I learned never to send my mind into the day without first understanding its terrain. The revelation came during a campaign where I faced an opponent known for unpredictable tactics. Traditional strategic positioning wasn't enough, needed to position my very thoughts to respond to rapid changes. I realized that most commanders, like most people, react from wherever their mind happens to be at the moment of challenge. This is mental weakness disguised as mental activity. I began mapping my mental landscape each dawn. Where were my thoughts naturally strong? What areas of thinking felt vulnerable? Which mental habits served me, and which ones left me exposed? This wasn't abstract philosophy, it was practical preparation for mental combat. For instance, I discovered that my mind was sharpest for complex analysis in the first hour after waking, but became overconfident by midday. I learned to position my most crucial strategic decisions during this peak clarity, and to approach afternoon challenges with deliberate caution. This simple positioning adjustment won me more battles than any tactical maneuver. I also learned to identify the difference between reactive thinking and strategic thinking. Reactive thinking is like scattered troops. Each thought responds independently to immediate stimuli, creating chaos and contradictory actions. Strategic thinking positions thoughts in formation, where each mental process supports the others toward a unified objective. The breakthrough moment came during the siege of a supposedly impregnable fortress. My advisors saw only walls and defenses, reacting to what the enemy wanted us to see. But my positioned mind saw the deeper pattern. The fortress was positioned to defend against traditional assault, but vulnerable to patient siege tactics that would turn their strength into weakness. While my competitors' minds reacted to surface appearances, my positioned consciousness saw the strategic reality. We won not by attacking their strength, but by positioning ourselves where their strength became irrelevant. This victory taught me that mental positioning creates strategic options that reactive thinking cannot perceive. In modern terms, consider how most people approach challenging meetings or difficult conversations. They react to whatever energy or agenda others bring, allowing their mind to be positioned by external circumstances. This is mental defeat before the encounter begins. Instead, position your consciousness before the challenge arrives. What mental stance serves your objectives? What thoughts need to be ready for deployment? What mental formations protect you from manipulation or confusion? This preparation transforms you from a reactor to a strategic actor. Mental positioning also means understanding that not all thoughts deserve equal mental real estate. Just as I would never position elite troops in unimportant battles, you must learn which thoughts deserve your sharpest attention and which can be handled by routine mental processes. The positioned mind maintains strategic advantage because it chooses its battles consciously rather than accepting whatever mental combat the environment provides. This is the difference between mental leadership and mental victimhood. Each morning, I would unroll what I called the dawn scroll, my practice of gathering intelligence about my own mental state before facing the day's potential battles. Most strategists scout enemy territory, but never scout their own capabilities. This blindness to internal conditions has cost more victories than any external force. I learned this lesson through a painful experience. There was a crucial negotiation where I arrived confident in my preparation, armed with facts and strategies, only to discover midway through that my mind was operating at perhaps 60% capacity. I hadn't slept well, my emotional state was affected by unrelated concerns, and my usual mental sharpness felt blunted. The negotiations suffered because I hadn't gathered accurate intelligence about my own mental resources. From that day forward, I began each morning with systematic not vague feelings or assumptions, but precise intelligence gathering about my mental battlefield conditions. What was my actual energy level, not what I hoped it would be? How clear was my thinking? Could I handle complex analysis, or should I focus on simpler decisions? What emotions were present that might cloud judgment? What priorities deserved my sharpest attention? This morning, intelligence gathering revealed patterns I had never noticed. My strategic thinking peaked at different times, depending on sleep, quality, recent stress, and even seasonal changes. My patience for difficult people varied predictably based on factors I could identify and plan around. My capacity for creative problem solving followed rhythms I could map and utilize. Most importantly, I discovered that mental state changes throughout the day in predictable ways. Just as I would never deploy troops without understanding how their energy and morale might shift during a long battle, I learned to anticipate how my mental resources would evolve from morning to evening. The strategic advantage became enormous. Instead of making important decisions whenever they arose, I began timing crucial mental work for periods when my intelligence gathering indicated peak capacity. Instead of accepting meetings when others preferred, I scheduled challenging conversations when my emotional intelligence was strongest. I also learned to recognize early warning signs of mental fatigue, emotional reactivity, or cognitive overload, just as scouts report enemy troop movements before they become visible to the main force. My morning assessment would reveal mental vulnerabilities before they became problems. For example, if my morning intelligence indicated lower energy reserves, I could adjust the day's mental formation accordingly, simplifying decisions, delegating complex analysis, or postponing non-urgent strategic thinking. This prevented mental defeats that come from overcommitting compromised mental resources. The practice also revealed how external factors affected internal capabilities. Certain types of conversations drained mental energy more than others. Specific environments either sharpened or dulled my thinking. Even dietary choices influenced cognitive performance in ways I could predict and plan around. This morning ritual transforms random daily mental experience into strategic advantage. Instead of discovering your mental state through trial and error, as the day unfolds, you begin with accurate intelligence about your actual capabilities and limitations. Why do most people fail at this? They assume their mind operates at consistent capacity regardless of conditions. This assumption guarantees that they will overcommit during low-capacity periods and underutilize high-capacity moments. They fight mental battles with outdated intelligence about their own forces. I kept in my personal quarters a simple stone I called the Formation Stone, not for any mystical properties, but as a reminder that scattered thoughts are like scattered troops, easily defeated by any organized opposition. Each morning, I would hold this stone while arranging my thoughts into strategic formation, transforming mental chaos into mental power. The discovery came during one of my earliest independent commands. I had prepared extensively, studied every tactical manual, memorized terrain maps, and supply logistics. Yet, when the moment of decision arrived, my mind felt like a marketplace at noon, dozens of thoughts competing for attention, each seeming urgent, none clearly prioritized. My thoughts scattered in every direction. Worry about supply lines mixed with concern for troop morale. Tactical considerations battled with political implications. Past failures haunted present decisions, while future consequences demanded immediate attention. This mental chaos led to hesitation, and hesitation in battle invites defeat. That night, after nearly losing what should have been a routine engagement, I recognized my fundamental error. I had organized everything except the most crucial element, my own consciousness. My thoughts needed formation just as much as my soldiers did. I began experimenting with morning mental organization. First, I learned to identify which thoughts were allies advancing my objectives and which were enemies undermining my clarity. Productive strategic thinking differed sharply from unproductive worry, yet both felt equally urgent when scattered throughout consciousness. The breakthrough came when I stopped trying to eliminate unhelpful thoughts and instead learned to position them properly. Worry about potential problems became useful when positioned as contingency planning. Emotional reactions became valuable intelligence when positioned as information rather than commands. Past failures became strategic assets when positioned as experience rather than judgment. I developed a specific technique for mental formation. Each morning, I would mentally line up my thoughts like positioning battle lines. Priority concerns took the front formation. These demanded my sharpest attention and clearest thinking. Supporting considerations took middle positions, important but not urgent. Background awareness took the rear guard, present but not demanding active attention. This formation prevented mental ambush, where urgent but unimportant thoughts would suddenly seize control of consciousness during crucial moments. It also prevented mental exhaustion, where equal energy was wasted on unequal priorities. The most powerful insight was learning to arrange thoughts in supporting formations, rather than competing ones. Instead of having strategic thinking fight against emotional awareness, I positioned them as complementary forces. Logic provided structure, while intuition provided timing. Analysis identified options, while wisdom chose between them. I remember a critical battle where this formation saved us from catastrophe. Enemy cavalry charged our right flank, while their main force engaged our center. A scattered mind might have reacted to whichever threat seemed most immediate, but my formed consciousness maintained strategic perspective. I could simultaneously track the cavalry threat, coordinate center resistance, and identify the enemy's true objective, which was to break our communication lines behind both attacks. My mental formation allowed parallel processing of multiple strategic elements without losing coherence. We countered the cavalry, reinforced the center, and protected our communications because my thoughts operated in coordinated formation rather than reactive chaos. In modern application, consider how most people approach complex challenges. They allow every aspect of the problem to demand equal mental attention simultaneously. Work pressure competes with family concerns. Current tasks battle with future planning. Personal doubts undermine professional confidence. Mental formation organizes these elements strategically. Current urgent tasks receive focused attention during designated times. Future planning occupies scheduled mental space. Personal concerns are acknowledged but positioned to support rather than sabotage professional performance. The disciplined mind maintains formation under pressure, while the undisciplined mind scatters at the first sign of complexity. This difference determines who controls challenging situations and who is controlled by them. In my study, I kept an hourglass that I called the hourglass of opportunity, not to track time's passage, but to remind myself that mental sharpness, like tide and battle, follows natural rhythms that the wise strategist learns to read and utilize. Most people force mental effort at convenient times rather than optimal times, guaranteeing suboptimal results. I learned this principle through a costly mistake early in my career. A rival commander had challenged me to what appeared to be a simple strategic competition. We would each present our analysis of a hypothetical military scenario to a panel of senior officials. I was confident in my analytical abilities and prepared my presentation the night before, working late into the evening to polish every detail. The next morning, I arrived proud of my thorough preparation, only to discover that my mind felt sluggish, and my insight seemed obvious rather than brilliant. My rival, however, delivered a presentation that sparkled with strategic creativity and piercing analysis. I learned later that he had prepared his basic framework days earlier, then spent that morning in focused strategic thinking when his mind was naturally sharpest. That defeat taught me that timing mental effort is more crucial than quantity of mental effort. A mind operating at peak capacity for 30 minutes accomplishes more than a tired mind working for 3 hours. Yet most people, including my younger self, schedule mental work based on external convenience rather than internal optimization. I began studying my own mental rhythms, like studying battlefield terrain. I discovered that my capacity for complex strategic analysis peaked within 2 hours of waking, remained strong until midday, then declined predictably through the afternoon. My patience for dealing with difficult personalities followed different patterns: strongest in late morning, most vulnerable in early evening. More subtly, I learned that different types of mental work had different optimal timing windows. Creative strategic thinking required fresh mental energy and minimal distractions. Detailed analytical work demanded sustained focus, but could tolerate some background mental activity. Difficult interpersonal negotiations needed emotional intelligence, which peaked when I felt mentally confident but not overconfident. The strategic advantage became enormous once I aligned important mental work with natural mental timing. Instead of scheduling crucial strategic planning whenever my calendar permitted, I protected my peak mental hours for the most consequential thinking. Instead of accepting meetings when others preferred, I negotiated timing that utilized my strongest mental capacities. I remember a pivotal negotiation where timing made the difference between success and failure. The opposing party insisted on late afternoon discussions, probably hoping that mental fatigue would make me more agreeable to their terms. Understanding my mental rhythms, I politely suggested early morning sessions, explaining that complex negotiations deserved our sharpest thinking. The timing shift completely changed the dynamic. During my peak mental hours, I could track multiple negotiation threads simultaneously, identify subtle implications in their proposals, and respond with strategic precision. They, operating during what was probably their suboptimal mental period, made several tactical errors that gave us significant advantages. This principle extends beyond formal negotiations to daily decision-making. Most people make important choices whenever the decision becomes pressing, regardless of their mental state. They commit to significant purchases when exhausted, have crucial conversations when emotionally reactive, or make strategic career decisions when overwhelmed by immediate pressures. Mental timing means protecting your peak cognitive hours for peak cognitive demands. It means scheduling routine decisions during routine mental periods and postponing important choices until your mind can engage them with full capacity. I also learned to recognize when mental timing was unfavorable for any serious thinking, just as I would avoid battle when terrain or weather created disadvantages. I learned to delay important mental work when internal conditions weren't optimal. Better to postpone a decision than to make it poorly due to timing. The undisciplined mind accepts whatever mental state happens to be present when decisions arise. The strategic mind creates favorable conditions for important thinking, just as a wise general chooses favorable conditions for important battles. Each morning, I would review what I called the resource ledger, my assessment of how much mental energy I possessed and how it should be allocated across the day's battles. Just as I would never commit all my forces to the first skirmish, I learned never to exhaust my mental resources on problems that didn't deserve my sharpest thinking. The lesson came during a campaign where I faced multiple simultaneous challenges: supply shortages, political pressure from court officials, low troop morale, and an approaching enemy force. In my eagerness to solve everything immediately, I threw my full mental energy at each problem as it arose, debating grain allocations with the same intensity I brought to tactical planning. By afternoon, when enemy scouts were spotted and real strategic thinking was desperately needed, my mind felt drained and sluggish. I had wasted precious mental resources on problems that required administrative attention, not strategic genius. That evening, as I struggled to develop coherent battle plans with a fatigued mind, I understood my crucial error. Mental energy is finite, and like any finite resource, It must be allocated strategically based on potential impact. Every moment of sharp thinking invested in minor problems is mental energy unavailable for major opportunities. Every decision that receives more mental attention than it deserves is attention stolen from decisions that could change everything. I began treating mental energy like military supplies, carefully budgeted, strategically deployed, never wasted, on objectives that didn't justify the investment. This required developing the ability to quickly assess which challenges deserved my peak mental capacity and which could be handled with routine cognitive processes. The morning practice became crucial for this allocation strategy. I would identify the day's potential decision points and rank them by strategic importance. Routine administrative choices received minimal mental investment, quick decisions based on established principles. Tactical adjustments received moderate attention, careful analysis, but not extended deliberation. Strategic opportunities that could reshape entire campaigns received the full power of fresh, focused consciousness. This approach revealed something most people never realize: they allocate mental energy based on urgency rather than importance. Whatever screams loudest receives the most attention, regardless of its actual significance. This guarantees that mental resources are exhausted on pressing but unimportant matters, while truly crucial opportunities receive whatever cognitive capacity remains. I learned to distinguish between problems that required my personal mental investment and problems that needed solutions but not necessarily my solutions. Many challenges that felt urgent were actually routine obstacles that others could handle competently. My unique strategic capability should be reserved for situations where that specific capability made the decisive difference. The breakthrough came during a complex siege where I faced a temptation to personally oversee every detail of preparation. Instead, I forced myself to identify which elements truly required strategic thinking versus which elements required competent execution of established procedures. I invested my mental energy in the strategic questions: timing of assault, deployment of limited special resources, coordination of multiple attack vectors, while delegating operational details to capable subordinates. This resource allocation allowed me to maintain mental sharpness for the crucial decision points during the actual assault. When unexpected developments required rapid strategic adjustment, my mind was prepared rather than exhausted. We succeeded because I had conserved mental energy for the moments when strategic thinking mattered most. In modern application, consider how most people approach demanding days. They give equal mental effort to email responses and strategic planning, to routine meetings and crucial negotiations, to minor inconveniences and major opportunities. By evening, they have no mental resources remaining for the personal decisions and relationships that actually determine life's satisfaction. Mental resource strategy means ruthlessly protecting your cognitive capacity for high-impact thinking. It means quickly resolving or delegating low-stakes decisions to preserve energy for high-stakes choices. It means saying no to mental battles that cannot be won or don't need to be fought. The strategic mind operates like a master general who understands that winning the war requires losing some battles, not through defeat, but through refusal to engage where victory doesn't advance the larger objective. I maintained what I called the terrain journal, daily observations of the mental conditions that either sharpened or dulled my strategic thinking. Just as I would never fight without understanding physical battlefields, I learned never to engage important mental work without understanding the terrain of consciousness where that work would unfold. The insight emerged during a period when my strategic decisions seemed inconsistent. Some days brought brilliant insights and clear judgment, while other days, the same type of problems left me confused and reactive. I initially attributed this to random variation, but careful observation revealed distinct patterns related to environmental and internal conditions. I discovered that my mental terrain conditions under which my mind operated dramatically influenced thinking quality. A quiet morning in my private study produced different cognitive results than the same mental work attempted in a crowded command tent. Fresh air and natural light sharpened analysis, while stuffy enclosed spaces seemed to muddy even simple decisions. More subtly, I learned that emotional terrain affected strategic terrain. When I felt confident but not overconfident, my mind could handle complex, multi-layered problems with clarity. When anxiety or frustration dominated the mental environment, even routine tactical decisions became difficult. When anger was present, I could generate energy for immediate action, but lost capacity for long-term strategic thinking. The morning practice of terrain assessment became as crucial as weather reports for military campaigns. I would evaluate the day's mental geography, what conditions supported peak thinking, and what conditions created cognitive obstacles, which environments would enhance mental performance and which would undermine it. This awareness allowed me to seek favorable mental terrain for important thinking and avoid unfavorable conditions when possible. For complex strategic planning, I would arrange morning sessions in quiet spaces with minimal distractions. For difficult interpersonal discussions, I would choose environments that supported calm emotional terrain rather than reactive environments. I remember a critical strategic conference where understanding mental terrain prevented disaster. The meeting was scheduled in a noisy, crowded room during late afternoon conditions that I knew would muddy my thinking and increase my tendency toward impatience. Instead of accepting these unfavorable conditions, I suggested we postpone until morning and relocate to a quieter space. The terrain change transformed the entire discussion. In optimal conditions, I could track the complex political implications of various strategic options while maintaining clear focus on our primary objectives. The other participants, also benefiting from favorable mental terrain, contributed insights that would have been impossible in the original chaotic environment. Mental terrain also includes the internal landscape of thoughts and emotions present when important thinking begins. Just as I would avoid attacking uphill against prepared positions, I learned to avoid tackling crucial decisions when my mental terrain was dominated by stress, fatigue, or emotional reactivity. This principle extends to recognizing when retreat is the wisest tactical choice. Sometimes the most strategic decision is postponing important thinking until mental terrain becomes favorable. Better to delay a decision than to make it poorly due to unfavorable internal conditions. I also learned to create favorable mental terrain when natural conditions weren't optimal. Simple changes in physical environment, moving to a different space, adjusting lighting, reducing noise could shift mental landscape from foggy to clear. Brief periods of physical movement or fresh air could transform sluggish thinking into sharp analysis. The terrain principle applies to both physical and social environments. Certain people naturally create mental terrain that supports clear thinking, while others generate confusion or defensiveness that clouds judgment. Strategic mental work requires choosing not just when and where to think, but with whom to engage in serious discussion. In modern terms, consider how most people accept whatever mental terrain happens to be available when important decisions arise. They attempt crucial conversations in distracting environments, make significant choices when emotionally reactive, or engage in strategic planning when surrounded by interruptions and stress. Understanding mental terrain means taking responsibility for creating conditions that support your best thinking. It means recognizing that the environment shapes consciousness just as consciousness shapes decisions. The wise strategist controls terrain whenever possible rather than adapting to whatever terrain circumstance provides. In my morning practice, I used what I called the mirror of truth, not an actual mirror, but a mental practice of seeing past the illusions and false assumptions that my own mind created. more skillfully than any enemy deception. I learned that the mind deceives itself with such subtlety that these internal deceptions often prove more dangerous than external lies. The revelation came during a campaign where I was certain of victory based on what seemed like overwhelming evidence. My scouts reported enemy weakness, supply shortages, and low morale. My advisors confirmed the intelligence. Every logical analysis pointed to easy triumph. Yet something felt wrong, though I couldn't identify why. Instead of trusting my comfortable assumptions, I forced myself to examine them with ruthless honesty. What did I want to believe about this situation? What would be convenient for my plans? What fears was I avoiding by accepting optimistic interpretations? What evidence was I ignoring because it complicated my preferred narrative? The mirror revealed uncomfortable truths. I wanted to believe the enemy was weak because I was eager for a quick victory that would enhance my reputation. I was interpreting ambiguous intelligence optimistically because pessimistic readings would require more complex strategies. I was avoiding evidence of enemy preparation because acknowledging it would mean admitting my initial assessment was flawed. When I forced myself to see past these self-deceptions, a very different picture emerged. The enemy's apparent weakness might be strategic positioning rather than genuine vulnerability. Their supply shortages could be temporary or deliberately exaggerated. Their low morale might be reconnaissance deception designed to encourage exactly the kind of overconfident assault I was planning. That morning's honest self-examination revealed that I was about to walk into a carefully prepared trap. Misled not by enemy intelligence, but by my own wishful thinking. We adjusted our strategy completely, approaching with caution rather than confidence, and discovered that the enemy had indeed prepared a devastating ambush for the overconfident attack they expected. This experience taught me that mental deception operates through comfortable assumptions, convenient interpretations, and selective attention to supporting evidence while ignoring contradictory information. The mind naturally shapes perception to support existing beliefs and desired outcomes, creating a false sense of certainty about uncertain situations. The morning mirror practice became essential for strategic accuracy. I would systematically examine my assumptions about important situations, asking uncomfortable questions about my own motivations and biases. What did I want to be true about this challenge? What evidence was I emphasizing or ignoring? What fears or desires were influencing my interpretation of information? I learned to identify the most common forms of mental self-deception. Overconfidence bias made me underestimate risks when things were going well. Confirmation bias led me to seek information that supported predetermined conclusions while avoiding information that challenged them. Wishful thinking transformed possibilities into probabilities and probabilities into certainties. The practice revealed how emotions clouded strategic judgment in predictable ways. Anger made me overestimate my power and underestimate opponent capability. Fear made me overestimate threats and underestimate opportunities. Pride made me resistant to information that suggested previous decisions were flawed. I remember a crucial negotiation where the mirror practice prevented a catastrophic agreement. The other party's offer seemed generous, and I felt pleased with my negotiating skill. But the morning mirror revealed that I was accepting their offer because it flattered my ego rather than because it served my strategic interests. My desire to feel successful was blinding me to several problematic clauses that would create future difficulties. The honest self-examination showed that their apparent generosity was actually strategic positioning for advantages they would claim later. What felt like victory was actually the opening move in a longer game where they held most of the advantages. By seeing past my own desire for immediate success, I could negotiate a genuinely beneficial agreement instead of an ego-satisfying trap. Mental deception also operates through false urgency, the illusion that decisions must be made immediately. when actually more time is available for better analysis. It operates through false scarcity, the assumption that current opportunities won't repeat when similar opportunities often arise later under better conditions. In modern application, the mirror practice means regularly examining your own motivations, assumptions, and interpretations with uncomfortable honesty. What do you want to believe about your career situation, relationships, or opportunities? What evidence are you emphasizing or ignoring? What fears or desires are shaping your perception of reality? The strategic mind maintains accuracy through systematic self-examination, while the undisciplined mind drifts into comfortable illusions that feel true but lead to strategic disasters. I kept what I called the wind compass knot, a navigation tool, but a mental practice for sensing changing conditions and preparing my mind to adapt rather than resist when circumstances shifted unexpectedly. I learned that mental rigidity, more than any external force, destroys strategic advantage when situations evolve beyond original plans. The lesson came during what should have been a straightforward campaign. I had developed what I considered a perfect strategy, elegant, thorough, accounting for every variable I could identify. My confidence grew as initial movements proceeded exactly as planned. Enemy responses matched my predictions. Supply lines functioned as projected. Weather cooperated with our timeline. Then everything changed within a single day. Unexpected reinforcements arrived to support our opponents. A river we planned to cross had flooded beyond passability. Political developments altered our strategic objectives mid-campaign. Local allies withdrew support due to circumstances we hadn't anticipated. My perfect plan suddenly became perfectly useless. Worse, my attachment to the original strategy initially prevented me from recognizing how completely the situation had transformed. I kept trying to force outcomes that were no longer possible, instead of adapting to the reality that now existed. That near disaster taught me that the sharpest mind is not the most rigid mind, but the most adaptable mind. Strategic thinking must be like water, maintaining essential principles while reshaping to fit whatever container circumstances provide. Mental flexibility, not mental force, creates sustainable strategic advantage. I began incorporating adaptation, preparation into my morning practice. Instead of merely planning for expected scenarios, I would specifically prepare my mind to pivot when assumptions proved incorrect. What principles would remain constant regardless of changing circumstances? What elements of my strategy were truly essential versus merely preferred? How could I maintain strategic coherence while adjusting tactical approaches? This mental preparation for unpredictability proved more valuable than specific contingency planning. No matter how thoroughly I planned for alternative scenarios, reality always produced variations I hadn't anticipated. But a mind prepared for adaptation could respond effectively to unexpected developments without losing strategic coherence. The breakthrough insight was learning to distinguish between core strategic principles and specific tactical implementations. My fundamental objectives rarely needed to change when circumstances shifted, but my methods for achieving those objectives required constant adaptation based on evolving conditions. I remember a complex diplomatic negotiation where adaptation made the difference between success and failure. I had prepared extensively for what I expected to be a formal, structured discussion about territorial agreements. Instead, I discovered that the other party preferred informal conversation and was more interested in trade relationships than territorial definition. My original plan would have failed because it assumed negotiation conditions that didn't exist. But my prepared flexibility allowed me to maintain my core objectives, securing favorable strategic position and preventing future conflicts, while completely changing my approach to match the actual situation rather than my planned situation. The adaptation principle extends beyond tactical flexibility to mental flexibility. When facing complex problems, I learned to hold my analysis lightly rather than becoming attached to initial interpretations. New information should refine understanding rather than being forced to fit pre-existing conclusions. This mental agility requires comfort with uncertainty and change. Most people resist adaptation because it feels like admitting error or weakness, but strategic adaptation is actually a sign of mental strength, ability to remain effective as circumstances evolve, rather than becoming obsolete when conditions change. I also learned that rapid adaptation requires strong foundational principles. A mind without core strategic values becomes purely reactive, shifting direction with every change in circumstance. But a mind grounded in clear principles can adapt tactics dramatically while maintaining strategic consistency. The morning compass practice involved imagining various ways the day's plans might need to change and preparing my mind to recognize adaptation signals early. What would indicate that my initial approach wasn't working? What alternative methods could achieve the same essential objectives? How could I maintain strategic momentum even if specific tactics required adjustment? In modern terms, consider how rapidly business conditions, relationship dynamics, and career landscapes change. People who thrive are those who adapt quickly while maintaining their core values and objectives. People who struggle are often those who resist change until it becomes overwhelming or who change so randomly that they lose strategic direction. Mental adaptation means preparing your mind to be strategically flexible rather than tactically rigid. It means building comfort with uncertainty and change as natural conditions rather than problems to be solved. The adaptive mind maintains strategic advantage precisely because it can evolve with circumstances rather than being defeated by them. Each morning, I would perform a ritual with what I called the unity bell, not an actual bell, but a mental practice of aligning my rational thoughts, emotional wisdom, and physical energy into unified purpose. I discovered that a divided mind cannot achieve strategic victory, no matter how brilliant its individual components might be. The realization came during a campaign where I found myself paralyzed by internal conflict. My logical analysis suggested one course of action, my emotional instincts urged a different approach, and my physical energy felt aligned with neither option. Instead of making a decision, I spent precious hours debating with myself while opportunities dissolved and opponents gained advantage. My rational mind had identified the tactically superior strategy based on troop strengths and terrain advantages. My emotional intelligence sensed something wrong with this approach, a feeling that it would create more problems than it solved, though I couldn't articulate why. My physical instincts felt sluggish and resistant when I imagined implementing the logical plan. This internal warfare weakened me more than any external opposition could have. While my mind fought against itself, my enemies advanced with unified purpose. I realized that mental division is strategic suicide, like commanding an army where different units receive contradictory orders and spend their energy fighting each other instead of achieving shared objectives. The solution required learning to integrate all aspects of mental function rather than allowing them to compete. Logic provided crucial analysis of facts and probabilities. Emotion provided essential intelligence about values, relationships, and long-term consequences. Physical intuition provided timing and energy management guidance. None of these sources of intelligence was dispensable, but they needed coordination rather than competition. I developed a morning practice of mental unity that began with acknowledging each voice of internal wisdom. What did careful analysis reveal about the challenges ahead? What did emotional intelligence sense about the human dynamics involved? What did physical intuition suggest about timing and energy allocation? Instead of choosing between these perspectives, I learned to synthesize them into coherent strategy. The breakthrough came during a siege where unified decision-making saved us from disaster. Logic indicated that immediate assault would succeed based on our superior numbers and equipment. Emotional intelligence detected that our troops lacked genuine commitment to this particular battle. They would fight competently, but not with the fierce dedication that difficult victories require. Physical intuition suggested that our timing was wrong. Rushing the assault would waste our advantages. Instead of allowing these perspectives to paralyze decision-making, I used each to refine the others. Logic's assault plan became the foundation, but emotional intelligence adjusted the approach to build genuine troop commitment. And physical intuition redesigned the timing to maximize our natural advantages. The unified strategy succeeded because it integrated all forms of available intelligence rather than following only one perspective. Mental unity also requires resolving internal conflicts before external battles. I learned that unresolved personal tensions, anger, fear, doubt, overconfidence, internal static that interferes with clear, strategic thinking. These emotional states don't disappear through logic alone, but they can be positioned to support rather than undermine strategic objectives. For example, anger at enemy tactics could be channeled into fierce determination rather than clouding judgment. Fear of potential consequences could be transformed into careful preparation rather than paralyzing anxiety. Personal doubts could become thorough contingency planning rather than decision avoidance. I remember a crucial negotiation where internal unity made the decisive difference. I felt simultaneously confident about our position and concerned about potential complications. Instead of allowing confidence and concern to battle each other, I used confidence to maintain strong negotiating posture, while using concern to identify potential agreement flaws before finalizing terms. This integration allowed me to negotiate boldly without becoming reckless, and carefully without becoming timid. The unified approach achieved results that neither pure confidence nor pure caution could have accomplished alone. The unity practice also revealed how physical energy affects strategic thinking. When my body felt strong and vital, my mind generated bold, expansive strategies. When physical energy was low, my thinking became conservative and reactive. Neither state was inherently superior, but strategic effectiveness required aligning mental approach with actual energy levels rather than pretending energy conditions didn't matter. In modern application, consider how most people allow internal conflict to waste mental energy that should be directed toward external challenges. They fight battles between logic and emotion, between confidence and caution, between ambition and security, without recognizing that these patenting internal divisions weaken their capacity to handle actual problems effectively. Mental unity means treating all aspects of your intelligence as sources of strategic information rather than competing authorities. It means using emotional wisdom to refine logical analysis rather than allowing them to cancel each other out. The unified mind brings full capacity to bear on external challenges instead of dissipating energy through internal warfare. I carried with me what I called the lightning stoner, small piece of quartz that reminded me that the flash of strategic insight comes not from mental hurry, but from mental preparation. I discovered that true mental speed emerges from readiness rather than rushing, from having prepositioned solutions rather than generating them under pressure. The insight came during a battle where split-second decisions determined life and death. Enemy cavalry appeared on our flank without warning, threatening to roll up our entire line before we could respond. My lieutenants looked to me for immediate orders, but the situation was too complex for quick analysis. I needed to assess threat level, evaluate defensive options, coordinate multiple unit responses, and maintain overall strategic coherence simultaneously. Yet somehow, the decision came instantly, not through frantic mental activity, but through recognition I had mentally rehearsed similar scenarios during countless morning preparations. My mind didn't need to solve this problem from scratch, because I had already worked through the strategic principles that applied to unexpected flank attacks. The solution appeared like lightning, not because I thought faster under pressure, but because I had thought thoroughly during calm periods. Mental speed, I realized, comes from preparation rather than acceleration. The fastest mind is the most prepared mind, not the most hurried mind. This discovery transformed my morning practice. Instead of only planning for expected challenges, I began mentally rehearsing responses to categories of problems I might encounter. What principles applied to supply disruptions? How should I respond to unexpected political pressures? What strategies worked when facing superior numbers? What approaches succeeded when dealing with unreliable allies? This preparation didn't involve memorizing specific responses to specific situations that would be impossible given the infinite variety of real circumstances. Instead, I developed mental templates and strategic principles that could be rapidly applied to novel situations. When challenges arose, my mind could quickly categorize the problem type and deploy relevant strategic frameworks. Instead of starting analysis from zero. The breakthrough insight was understanding that mental speed comes from pattern recognition, rather than rapid computation. When I encountered a new strategic challenge, my prepared mind could quickly identify which previous experiences and principles applied, then adapt them to current circumstances. This recognition process happened almost instantaneously, creating the appearance of superhuman mental speed. I remember a complex diplomatic crisis where this prepared speed proved decisive. Multiple allied city-states were demanding contradictory commitments from us, each threatening withdrawal if their specific requirements weren't met immediately. The situation was unique in its details, but my prepared mind instantly recognized it as a pattern I had studied competing ally management. Under time pressure, my mental templates provided immediate strategic structure. First, identify which allies were truly essential versus merely convenient. Second, determine which demands were genuine requirements versus negotiating positions. Third, find creative solutions that gave each ally their core needs without accepting their stated terms. Fourth, manage the sequence of responses to prevent coordination between demanding parties. This framework allowed me to respond with strategic coherence within minutes of understanding the crisis. Without mental preparation, the same analysis might have taken hours or days of confused deliberation while political opportunities vanished. Mental speed also requires recognizing when to think fast and when to think slow. Some decisions benefit from careful deliberation, while others require immediate response based on prepared principles. The prepared mind can quickly distinguish between these categories. Instead of applying the wrong cognitive approach to time-sensitive situations, I also learned that rushing the mind slows it down, while preparing the mind speeds it up. When I tried to think faster under pressure, my mind became scattered and ineffective. When I trusted my preparation and allowed solutions to emerge naturally, strategic insights appeared with remarkable speed and clarity. The preparation practice involved regularly updating my mental templates based on new experiences. Each strategic challenge provided data for refining my understanding of problem patterns and solution principles. Failed strategies taught me what to avoid, while successful approaches became part of my prepared response repertoire. In modern terms, consider how most people approach time-sensitive decisions. They either rush into quick responses without strategic thinking, or they become paralyzed by the complexity of analyzing everything from scratch under pressure. Neither approach utilizes the power of prepared mental speed. Mental speed preparation means building strategic templates during calm periods that can be rapidly deployed during pressure periods. It means understanding that apparent instant insight usually reflects extensive prior preparation rather than sudden brilliance. The lightning-fast strategic mind is built through patient daily practice, not through trying to think faster when speed becomes necessary. In my private moments, I would visualize what I called the fortress minder mental structure designed to protect cognitive energy from unnecessary expenditure, while maintaining readiness for battles that truly mattered. I learned that mental strength must be conserved for decisive moments rather than dissipated through constant engagement with every challenge that appears. The lesson came during a prolonged campaign where I faced continuous small problems that seemed to demand immediate strategic attention. Border disputes with minor tribes, supply disagreements with local merchants, discipline issues among troops, complaints from court officials about campaign expenses. Each issue felt urgent and personally addressed to me as commander. My initial approach was to engage each problem with full strategic analysis, treating every challenge as equally important. I prided myself on being thorough and decisive, giving careful consideration to even minor matters. But this approach gradually drained my mental energy, leaving me less capable when truly crucial decisions arose. The crisis came when enemy reinforcements appeared unexpectedly, requiring immediate strategic response, while I was mentally exhausted from hours of debate about grain allocation procedures. The contrast was stark. I had abundant energy for trivial decisions, but insufficient reserves for the strategic challenge that could determine campaign success or failure. That experience taught me that mental conservation is not laziness or avoidance, but strategic resource management. Every moment of sharp thinking invested in problems that don't require sharp thinking is cognitive capacity, unavailable when sharp thinking becomes essential for important outcomes. I began developing what I called fortress mind principles, defenses against unnecessary cognitive expenditure. First, I learned to quickly categorize challenges by their actual importance rather than their apparent urgency. Most problems that felt immediately pressing were actually routine, administrative matters that could be handled with established procedures rather than custom strategic analysis. Second, I developed standard responses to common problem categories. Instead of treating each supply dispute as a unique strategic challenge, I created general principles for supply management that could be applied quickly without extensive deliberation. This freed mental energy for genuinely novel problems that required creative strategic thinking. Third, I learned to delegate cognitive work when others were capable of handling challenges competently. My unique strategic capability should be reserved for situations where that specific capability made a decisive difference. Many problems needed solutions, but not necessarily my solutions. The fortress mind also meant learning to say no to mental battles that couldn't be won or didn't need to be fought. Some challenges were symptoms of larger issues that required systemic solutions rather than immediate tactical responses. Some conflicts were designed to drain my energy rather than achieve meaningful outcomes. I remember a political opponent who regularly raised trivial procedural objections to my strategic decisions, apparently hoping to exhaust my patience and attention through constant minor arguments. Initially, I responded to each objection with detailed strategic justification, treating his challenges as genuine intellectual engagement. Eventually, I recognized this pattern as mental energy warfare. His strategy was to consume my cognitive resources on irrelevant debates while more important strategic work went unattended. My fortress mind defense was to establish clear boundaries around which topics deserved detailed response and which could be handled with brief acknowledgement or delegation to subordinates. Mental conservation also requires recognizing energy drains disguised as productive activity. Some types of thinking feel important but actually waste cognitive resources on problems that have no good solutions or on analysis that can't influence outcomes. Worry masquerades as preparation. Rumination disguises itself as strategic thinking. Perfectionism pretends to be thoroughness. The fortress mind distinguishes between productive mental engagement and mental energy waste. Productive thinking moves toward actionable solutions or valuable insights. Mental waste cycles through the same concerns repeatedly without generating new understanding or better options. I learned to protect mental energy through environmental design as well as internal discipline. Certain people naturally created mental energy drains through their communication style, emotional neediness, or tendency to present problems without solutions. Strategic mental conservation meant limiting unnecessary exposure to energy-draining personalities and situations. The fortress also required building mental buffers around peak cognitive periods. Just as I would protect crucial military supplies from casual consumption, I learned to protect my sharpest mental hours from routine activities that could be handled during lower energy periods. In modern application, consider how most people allow their mental energy to be consumed by whatever demands attention throughout the day. They respond to every email with equal cognitive investment, engage in every workplace drama with full emotional energy, and treat every decision as equally deserving of careful analysis. Mental conservation means ruthlessly protecting your cognitive capacity for high-impact thinking while developing efficient systems for handling routine mental tasks. It means recognizing that your sharpest thinking is a limited resource that should be allocated strategically rather than spent on whatever problem happens to be most vocal. The fortress mind maintains strategic advantage by ensuring that mental strength remains available when strategic opportunities arise, rather than being exhausted on problems that matter less than they appear to matter. I practiced what I called the archer's minder, morning discipline of focusing mental energy like drawing a perfect bow, where every element of consciousness aligned toward a single precise target, rather than scattering effort across multiple vague objectives. I discovered that one precise thought consistently outweighs 1,000 scattered ones in producing strategic results. The revelation came during a siege, where conventional approaches had failed for weeks. My advisors offered dozens of suggestions: tunnel under the walls, build higher siege towers, negotiate with defenders, wait for disease to weaken their resistance, attempt night scaling, construct catapults for wall destruction, seek additional reinforcements, try diplomatic pressure through their allies. Each suggestion had merit, and my initial instinct was to pursue multiple approaches simultaneously, hoping that combined effort would eventually achieve breakthrough. But this scattered approach produced scattered results, progress on many fronts without decisive advance on any front. That night, I forced my mind into Archer's focus. Instead of pursuing every possible solution, what single approach offered the highest probability of decisive success? Instead of attacking their many weaknesses simultaneously, which one weakness was truly critical to their defense? Instead of applying general pressure everywhere, where could precise pressure create systemic collapse? The focused analysis revealed something scattered thinking had missed. The fortress's strength came from a sophisticated water distribution system that enabled them to withstand long siege. But this system had a single critical vulnerability: the main channel could be redirected by precise engineering work at a specific location outside their defensive perimeter. My scattered approach had identified this weakness weeks earlier, but had treated it as one option among many rather than recognizing it as the key to everything else. Mental precision revealed that solving this single problem would make all other problems irrelevant, while failing to solve it would make all other successes meaningless. We concentrated our engineering efforts on that precise target. Within days, Their water supply diminished critically, and they negotiated surrender rather than facing the inevitable consequences of thirst. Precise mental focus had achieved in days what scattered mental effort couldn't accomplish in weeks. This experience taught me that strategic thinking requires surgical precision rather than broad coverage. Most complex problems have critical elements that determine everything else, but these crucial factors often hide among numerous secondary considerations. Scattered attention treats all elements as equally important, while precise attention identifies the vital few that controlled the trivial many. I began training my mind like training an archer's aim. Each morning, I would practice focusing mental energy on single questions until clarity emerged, then shifting that same level of concentration to the next essential element. This precision drill taught me to distinguish between comprehensive analysis and scattered analysis. Comprehensive analysis examines all relevant factors systematically, in order of importance, with clear relationships between elements. Scattered analysis jumps randomly between concerns, treating symptoms as causes and secondary effects as primary drivers. The difference is not the amount of thinking, but the organization and focus of thinking. Mental precision also requires learning to ask precise questions rather than vague questions. Instead of wondering, how can I improve my strategic position, I learned to ask what specific capability, if developed, would most enhance my strategic options. Instead of analyzing what are the risks in this situation, I focused on which single risk, if it materialized, would most threaten my essential objectives. Precise questions generate precise insights, while vague questions produce vague understanding. That feels thorough, but lacks actionable clarity. The mind naturally mirrors the precision or imprecision of the questions it attempts to answer. I remember a complex negotiation where mental precision revealed the key to seemingly impossible agreement. Multiple parties wanted incompatible outcomes, and broad analysis showed why traditional compromises wouldn't satisfy anyone's core requirements. But precise focus on each party's underlying motivations revealed that their stated positions masked more flexible actual needs. Instead of trying to bridge the gap between their declared demands, I concentrated precisely on designing solutions that met their real requirements through unexpected approaches. This precision allowed creative problem-solving that scattered analysis couldn't have discovered, because it would have remained trapped by surface-level position conflicts. Mental precision extends to decision-making as well as analysis. Most people make vague decisions that feel decisive but lack clear implementation guidance. I will work harder is a scattered decision. I will protect my peak mental energy hours from routine tasks and use them exclusively for strategic planning. Is a precise decision that generates specific behavioral changes. The archer's mind also means accepting that precision sometimes requires ignoring interesting but irrelevant information. Scattered thinking tries to incorporate every potentially useful piece of data, creating complex analyses that obscure rather than illuminate key insights. Precise thinking ruthlessly focuses on information that directly affects the specific question being resolved. I learned that mental precision develops through practice with increasingly challenging focus targets. Simple decisions taught me to maintain concentration through completion. Complex problems taught me to sustain precision across multiple analytical steps. Crisis situations taught me to achieve precision quickly when time pressure made lengthy deliberation impossible. In modern terms, consider how information abundance often reduces rather than improves decision quality. People try to analyze everything, instead of identifying what specifically matters for their particular situation. They pursue comprehensive understanding rather than precise insight about actionable elements. Mental precision means training your mind to cut through complexity, to find the vital elements that determine outcomes. It means asking specific questions that generate actionable insights rather than general questions that produce interesting but unfocused information. The precision mind achieves superior results through focused excellence rather than scattered competence. I maintained what I called the victory scroller record, not of battles won on physical fields, but of challenges conquered first in mental preparation before they were ever encountered in reality. I learned that all external victories begin with internal mental victories, and that the mind prepared for triumph creates the conditions that make triumph inevitable. The understanding emerged during a campaign that seemed hopeless from every conventional perspective. We faced superior numbers, limited supplies, unfavorable terrain, and political pressure to achieve quick results. My advisors counseled retreat or negotiated settlement, and logical analysis supported their recommendations. Every external factor suggested inevitable defeat, yet something in my mental preparation suggested otherwise. Each morning, I had been mentally rehearsing not just tactical responses to their advantages, but strategic scenarios where our apparent weaknesses became hidden strengths. I had been winning this battle in my mind for weeks before circumstances forced us to fight it in reality. This mental victory work revealed opportunities that purely reactive analysis couldn't perceive. Their superior numbers required complex coordination that created communication vulnerabilities. Our limited supplies enforced mobility that could become strategic advantage if properly utilized. The unfavorable terrain that disadvantaged conventional tactics might favor unconventional approaches they wouldn't expect. The key insight was that mental victory is not wishful thinking or positive visualization, but rigorous strategic preparation that identifies actual pathways to success, even under adverse conditions. While my advisors saw only the obstacles, my prepared mind could perceive the hidden structure of opportunity that existed within those same circumstances. I began each day by achieving small mental victories, solving strategic puzzles during calm reflection that might become real problems under pressure. How could limited resources be allocated for maximum impact? How could apparent disadvantages be transformed into unexpected advantages? How could enemy strengths be redirected to serve our objectives? These mental victories built both strategic capability and psychological confidence. By the time external challenges materialized, my mind had already developed successful approaches and experienced the cognitive satisfaction of effective problem-solving. The external battle became implementation of solutions rather than desperate improvisation under pressure. The practice also involved mental rehearsal of challenging scenarios with particular attention to maintaining strategic coherence under stress. How would I respond if initial plans failed? How could I adapt strategy if assumptions proved incorrect? How would I maintain clear thinking if circumstances became more difficult than anticipated? This mental preparation proved decisive in the actual campaign. When their superior numbers attacked our positions, we responded with coordinated mobility that turned their size into a coordination liability. When supplies ran low, we had already identified unconventional sources that kept us operational while they struggled with their complex logistics. When terrain seemed to favor their conventional approaches, we utilized alternative strategies that made conventional thinking irrelevant. The victory emerged exactly as my mental preparation had rehearsed, not through our superiority in traditional measures, but through strategic approaches that made traditional measures irrelevant. We won because my mind had already solved the essential strategic problems before external circumstances demanded solutions. Mental victory practice extends beyond military or business strategy to personal effectiveness. Most people approach challenging situations hoping things will work out, but without systematic mental preparation for actually making things work out. They wait for external circumstances to determine outcomes instead of using mental preparation to create favorable outcomes. I remember applying this principle to a complex diplomatic negotiation where initial positions seemed completely incompatible. Instead of hoping for breakthrough insights during the actual discussions, I spent morning preparation time mentally rehearsing creative approaches to apparently impossible agreement structures. This mental victory work identified several solution pathways that surface analysis had missed. By the time formal negotiations began, my mind had already experienced successful problem solving and developed confidence in achievable approaches. The external negotiation became guided implementation of internally developed strategies, rather than reactive response to whatever dynamics emerged. The mental victory scroll also recorded small daily triumphs that built momentum for larger challenges, successfully organizing complex morning thoughts, making difficult decisions with clarity, maintaining strategic perspective during stressful interactions. These small mental victories created psychological foundation for handling significant strategic challenges. Mental victory differs fundamentally from mental fantasy. Fantasy imagines desired outcomes without realistic pathways for achievement. Mental victory identifies actual strategic approaches that can produce desired outcomes given proper implementation. Fantasy feels good but provides no actionable guidance. Mental victory feels challenging but generates specific capabilities. The practice requires honest assessment of both obstacles and opportunities. Mental victory can't ignore genuine difficulties, but it can identify strategic approaches that transform difficulties into advantages, or at least neutralize their threatening potential. In modern application, consider how most people approach challenging situations with worry rather than systematic mental preparation. They focus on what might go wrong rather than developing strategic approaches for making things go right. They use mental energy for anxiety rather than for solution development. Mental victory means using your mind to solve problems before you encounter them, to develop strategic advantages during preparation periods rather than hoping for inspiration during pressure periods. The mind that achieves victory internally creates the foundation for achieving victory externally, while the unprepared mind remains vulnerable to whatever circumstances external forces choose to provide. I keep with me always what I call the bridge of time, not a physical structure, but a conceptual tool that connects the strategic principles I developed in ancient warfare to the challenges you face in your contemporary battles. Though the surface details of conflict have changed dramatically, the fundamental patterns of strategic thinking remain as relevant today as they were on the battlefields of ancient China. Let me share with you how these morning practices that shaped my entire approach to strategy can transform your specific modern challenges. The terrain may be different, but the principles of mental preparation, strategic positioning, and conscious advantage creation apply whether you're commanding armies or managing your career, leading troops or leading teams, conquering territories or conquering personal limitations. Consider how the morning intelligence gathering I described translates to your daily reality. Your mind operates under the same natural rhythms and resource limitations that governed ancient strategic thinking. The executive facing crucial board presentations experiences the same cognitive variations I learned to map and utilize. The entrepreneur making critical business decisions works with the same finite mental energy that I had to allocate strategically across campaign challenges. Your morning assessment of mental capacity, emotional state, and cognitive readiness creates the same strategic advantage in modern competition that it provided in ancient warfare. When you understand your actual mental resources, rather than assuming consistent capability, you can schedule high-stakes decisions during peak periods rather than accepting whatever timing external pressures demand. The principle of mental positioning applies directly to contemporary strategic challenges. Whether you're positioning yourself for career advancement, negotiating complex business deals, or managing difficult relationships, the fundamental requirement remains the same: position your consciousness strategically before external circumstances. Force reactive responses. Modern workplace dynamics mirror ancient battlefield patterns more closely than most people recognize. Office politics involve the same strategic elements as military alliances: understanding power structures, managing resources, timing initiatives, building supportive coalitions, and neutralizing opposition through superior positioning rather than direct confrontation. The mental formation techniques I developed for organizing scattered thoughts work identically for organizing complex modern decision-making. Whether you're evaluating investment opportunities, resolving family conflicts, or developing business strategies, scattered thinking produces scattered results, while organized thinking produces organized outcomes. I have observed through centuries of strategic application that the most successful contemporary leaders unconsciously follow the same mental preparation principles I systematized in ancient China. They may not call it strategic thinking, but they naturally protect their peak mental energy for peak mental demands. They position themselves favorably before important encounters. They prepare mentally for challenging scenarios rather than hoping to improvise successfully under pressure. The difference is that they developed these capabilities through trial and error over decades, while systematic morning practice can develop them in months. They learned mental strategy unconsciously through accumulated experience, while you can learn it consciously through deliberate practice. The timeless nature of these principles reflects the fact that human consciousness operates according to consistent patterns regardless of technological or cultural changes. Your mind faces the same fundamental challenges mine did: limited energy that must be allocated strategically, natural rhythms that should be utilized rather than ignored, and a requirement for preparation rather than improvisation when outcomes matter significantly. The compound effect of daily mental preparation becomes extraordinary over time. Just as compound interest creates wealth through consistent small investments, each morning's practice builds slightly stronger strategic thinking capability. Each day's conscious mental positioning creates slightly better decision-making outcomes. Each week's systematic mental preparation produces slightly superior results. In challenging situations, over months and years, these slight improvements compound into significant strategic advantages. The person who maintains mental sharpness through systematic preparation eventually operates at a completely different level than those who rely on whatever mental state happens to be available. When decisions become pressing, I have also observed that these ancient principles work regardless of the specific battles you face, because they address universal elements of strategic thinking rather than particular tactical situations. Whether your challenges involve career advancement, relationship management, financial decisions, health optimization, or personal development, the underlying requirements remain consistent: clear thinking, strategic positioning, resource management, and prepared responses to difficult circumstances. The most important modern application may be recognizing that you are always in strategic competition, whether you acknowledge it consciously or not. Others are positioning themselves advantageously for the same opportunities you desire. Others are preparing mentally for the same challenges you will face. Others are developing strategic capabilities, while you remain reactive. The question is not whether you will engage in strategic thinking, but whether you will engage in it consciously and systematically, or unconsciously and randomly. The morning mental preparation I have shared provides conscious, systematic development of capabilities that will serve you regardless of how your specific life circumstances evolve. My personal commitment to you is that these practices will serve you as faithfully as they served me, because they address the unchanging realities of how consciousness creates strategic advantage. The battles you fight may be different from mine, but the mental preparation that creates victory remains the same across all times and circumstances. Now I share with you the master's routine, the complete morning mental preparation sequence that are refined through decades of strategic application, and that you can begin implementing immediately to develop your own unbeatable strategic mind. The practice begins before you engage with external demands or distractions. Your mind is sharpest in the first moments after waking, before it becomes scattered by email, news, conversations, or daily logistics. This pristine mental state provides optimal conditions for strategic preparation, but only if you protect it from immediate reactive engagement with whatever seems urgent. First, conduct your morning intelligence gathering. Assess your actual mental capacity rather than assuming it matches your hopes or plans. How clear is your thinking today? What is your emotional state, and how might it influence judgment? What is your energy level, and how should it be allocated across the day's priorities? What concerns or distractions are present that need acknowledgement or resolution? This assessment takes perhaps 5 minutes, but provides crucial strategic information for the entire day. You will make better decisions when you understand your actual mental resources rather than overcommitting during low-capacity periods or underutilizing high-capacity moments. Second, position your thoughts strategically, like positioning troops. Before battle, what mental formation serves today's anticipated challenges? Which thoughts deserve frontline attention and which should remain in supporting positions? What mental preparations will give you advantage in difficult situations you can foresee? Third, identify the day's one most important strategic objective, single outcome that would make the greatest difference to your longer-term position. Not the most urgent task or the most emotionally compelling concern, but the objective that offers the highest strategic leverage for advancing your essential goals. Fourth, conduct mental rehearsal of challenging scenarios you may encounter. How will you respond if initial plans prove inadequate? How will you maintain strategic coherence if unexpected obstacles arise? How will you adapt while preserving core objectives if circumstances shift dramatically? This mental rehearsal is not worried anticipation of problems, but strategic preparation that builds confidence and capability. By solving potential challenges during calm morning reflection, you develop solutions that would be difficult to generate under pressure. Fifth, establish your mental resource allocation for the day. Which activities deserve your sharpest thinking, and which can be handled with routine mental processes? When will you be naturally most capable of complex analysis, and how can you protect those periods for strategic work? The complete sequence requires perhaps 20 to 30 minutes, but these minutes create strategic advantage that compounds throughout the day. Investment in morning mental preparation consistently generates returns through better decisions, clearer thinking under pressure, and superior results in challenging situations. For your specific life circumstances, customize this routine rather than forcing rigid adherence to any particular format. The essential elements are intelligence gathering, strategic positioning, priority identification, scenario preparation, and resource allocation. The specific methods should match your natural thinking style and daily schedule. Maintain consistency when motivation wanes, because the benefits of mental preparation accumulate gradually rather than appearing immediately. Like physical fitness, mental fitness develops through regular practice over time rather than through sporadic intensive effort. The strategic mind is built through patient daily cultivation, not through crisis-driven attempts at rapid improvement. Common mistakes to avoid include making the practice too complex or time-consuming, which creates resistance rather than sustainable. Habit: begin with shorter, simpler versions and gradually develop more Sophisticated mental preparation as the routine becomes natural. Also avoid perfectionism that prevents practice rather than improving it. Better to maintain consistent basic mental preparation than to skip practice because you can't implement the complete routine perfectly. Strategic thinking capability develops through regular engagement, not through perfect execution. Measure progress through practical results rather than abstract mental experiences. Does the practice help you make better decisions? Do you handle pressure situations with greater clarity? Are you more effective at achieving important objectives? These practical improvements indicate developing strategic capability. Remember that mental preparation is investment, not expense. The time devoted to morning strategic thinking multiplies itself through improved effectiveness in everything else you do. 20 minutes of mental preparation can save hours of confused effort and prevent costly strategic mistakes. My personal insight from decades of practice is that the routine becomes increasingly valuable as it becomes more natural. Initially, mental preparation requires conscious effort and discipline. Eventually, it becomes as automatic as physical grooming, but far more valuable for strategic effectiveness. Begin tomorrow morning, not when conditions become perfect or when you feel completely prepared to implement everything perfectly. Strategic capability develops through practice, and practice must begin with imperfect initial attempts rather than delayed perfection. Trust the process, as I have learned to trust it through countless applications. The morning mental preparation that served me in ancient warfare will serve you in your contemporary challenges, because the principles of strategic thinking transcend the particular circumstances where they are applied. As I reflect on my life's work, I realize that the eternal flame, the lasting impact of mental discipline across generations burns brightest not in the battles I won or the territories I conquered, but in the strategic thinking capability that these morning practices created within me and can create within you. The physical victories of my campaigns have faded into historical curiosity, but the mental preparation principles that made those victories possible remain as powerful today as they were on ancient battlefields. This is the true legacy of strategic thinking, not specific achievements that belong to particular times and places, but timeless capabilities that serve human flourishing across all circumstances. When I began developing these morning practices, I thought I was preparing for military campaigns. I didn't realize I was developing mental capabilities that would influence every aspect of human effectiveness, decision-making under pressure, resource allocation, strategic positioning, adaptation to changing circumstances, and the fundamental ability to create favorable outcomes through conscious preparation rather than hoping for fortunate accidents. The ripple effects of a prepared mind extend far beyond the immediate challenges that motivate initial practice. Mental sharpness improves not only professional performance, but personal relationships, financial decisions, health choices, and the countless small daily determinations that collectively shape life quality. Strategic thinking capability enhances everything it touches, because clarity and preparation create better outcomes in any domain. More importantly, the morning mental preparation becomes a foundation for continuous learning and growth throughout life. The mind trained in strategic thinking approaches new challenges with systematic curiosity rather than reactive anxiety. It develops solutions rather than dwelling on problems. It creates opportunities rather than simply responding to whatever circumstances provide. Your commitment to mental excellence honors an ancient tradition that has guided effective leaders across cultures and centuries. Though they may not have used the same language or techniques, the most accomplished individuals throughout history have consistently engaged in some form of mental preparation that created strategic advantage over purely reactive approaches to complex challenges. This tradition continues through you as you develop your own. strategic thinking capability. The morning practices I have shared represent not my personal invention, but my contribution to humanity's ongoing discovery of how consciousness can be developed to serve wisdom, effectiveness, and beneficial outcomes for self and others. The promise I make to you, based on my own experience and observation across centuries, is that these practices will serve you as faithfully as they served me, because they address the unchanging realities of how mind creates strategic advantage. Your challenges may differ from mine in surface details, but the underlying requirements remain constant clear thinking, conscious preparation, strategic positioning, and developed capability rather than hope or luck. As you begin this practice, remember that you are not merely improving personal effectiveness, but participating in humanity's ancient quest to develop wisdom and capability that serves flourishing rather than suffering, creation rather than destruction, strategic advancement rather than reactive confusion. The morning mental preparation that sharpens your individual mind contributes to the collective advancement of human strategic thinking capability. Each person who develops clearer judgment and more effective decision-making adds to the sum total of wisdom available for addressing the complex challenges that face our world. This is the eternal nature of strategic thinking. It serves not only immediate personal objectives, but the larger human project of developing consciousness capable of creating beneficial outcomes through wisdom rather than through force, preparation rather than desperation, strategic excellence rather than accidental success. Begin tomorrow morning with confidence that you are engaging in practices that have proven their worth across millennia of human experience. Trust that your consistent effort will generate the same reliable results that strategic thinking has always produced: clearer judgment, better decisions, superior outcomes, and the deep satisfaction that comes from operating at the highest the level of your mental capability. The flame of strategic thinking now passes to you. Honor it through daily practice, and may your sharpened mind serve not only your own flourishing, but contribute to the wisdom and effectiveness that our world desperately needs.